Hello, my friends. Wait for Jon to get on here shortly. Thank you guys for watching these last couple of weeks and participating. It's been a really interesting process. We're going to get audio versions of some of the stuff. I know a few of you guys have requested that so you can listen to our conversations. So we're going to get that going. We'll let you know about that. And yeah, waiting for Jon to get on here. There he is. Waiting for Jon. What's up, buddy?
What up?
Okay, so I have to start this off by giving you the full FOMO. Now, of course, we're all in Los Angeles and we're still on relative quarantine lockdown. But of course, those of us that have figured out that we need humans in our lives, if we're living isolated, we have our little quarantine groups of people that have been safe. Some of us have been tested, things like that. And so you had a busy weekend seeing a few of your people, but you missed out on one of the best dinners last night. And you, as the expert chef, the master chef, Jon Castelli, you missed out on a good one last night. So you'll have to catch the next one when my brother comes down.
Incredible, legit. It looked insane.
Yeah, my brother is no joke as a cook, man. He's I think he's up doing yoga somewhere in the back there. But yeah, man, he cooked some amazing stuff. We made dumplings. It was a whole thing.
The curry and green papaya salad thing.
Yep. How was your weekend? You always make delicious food. I always see it on your feed.
What did I make? Oh, I made my first pesto this weekend, which was nice. My portion or my ratio of pasta to pesto was off, so I have to do it again. But it was really tasty.
It's all refining, right? You're a professional refiner, so you'll get it there, I'm sure.
So today is my first day without caffeine since I was old.
Since you're what? How old?
Since I was about 16 years old, probably.
Wow.
So my energy level is moderate to low today. So I'm going to have a little bit of a mellow chat today. So I'll try to be enthusiastic.
I'll try to bring the enthusiasm for both of us. We talk a lot about routines and things. I've had a lot of conversations in the last 4 or 5 days about morning routines, some with creative people, I guess all creative, but some music, some not. You deciding to not do caffeine, how is that going to affect? I mean, I guess it's your first day, so you don't know yet. So what's the reason for? How are you thinking about that in terms of your job and your life and all that?
The main reason for doing it is trying to not add any extra cortisol spikes to my day. So I'm trying to mitigate stress as much as possible.
Cortisol being the stress hormone.
So this is a pretty stressful and uncertain time still continuing after 2 months. So there's no reason to add more stress to life. And the reaction to caffeine, even if you feel it or not, is a stress hormone release. So I'd like to not have that. That being said, the morning routine part is so important to me. So I ordered decaf espresso from Verve, where I have my subscription, and it's super tasty this morning. I'm kind of along the lines of the belief of don't drink coffee if it's going to be caffeine free. That's a belief. It's a story I told myself. It made 0 sense. It was delicious. So I still have my morning espresso and then jumped into my morning meditation, then bike ride, right? So the routine has not shifted, but I did have to add Excedrin migraine to the intake this morning. The headache is about to be real before this.
So this is caffeine withdrawal. What's up, Evan? Yeah, I got the neon shirt on today.
Hey.
What's up, Evan? So you think you're getting caffeine withdrawals from it?
I mean, absolutely.
Immediately.
I had caffeine since I was 16 or 17. Yeah.
It's interesting. Talking about caffeine intake and substance intake generally. I mean, we've talked about alcohol, cannabis, caffeine, all of these things. You and I. One of the things working for Eric Valentine back in the day. No nothing, no alcohol, caffeine, substances of any kind, tobacco, none of that stuff. And it was interesting when I was working for him, sort of as an assistant. I started out by having sort of constant caffeine to keep up with him, but then at a certain point, you realize if you want to actually work for 12 hours straight, it's actually better to have nothing, because then you're just like this the whole day, as opposed to the caffeine spikes up and down. And that was a big change. I still love, and you know, you and I do slightly different things in the record making process. So I love taking caffeine. I don't generally do any alcohol. Sometimes cannabis. But for the creative change that it induces, the accelerant or the decelerant or whatever. I don't know.
Like a ride.
Yeah. So you've basically eliminated all of that stuff from your life. I guess you do drink alcohol, but at night you're not mixing drunk, unfortunately.
No, well, you can't hear above 5K once you start drinking out any drink. So as a mixer, I take you get a really smooth roll off from like 5K down. So, and when you're making a beat and you're cranking and you're feeling good, I would say alcohol has some, you know, lower inhibitions that probably, you know, though unhealthy for your eardrums and protection, is a fun thing to dive into. But mixing, I take my job really seriously. If someone's paying me to make their thing sound good, I'm not going to do anything to inhibit the nuance that I can hear. Especially
it is interesting. I'm curious what your experience is with this, the way people talk about sounds and eras, and people talk about the 70s, the cocaine sound of records and how bright they are.
Yeah.
And certainly alcohol has got to be involved in that as well, where people are just turning up treble. And
what do they drink in the 60s? Like really nice old French and Italian wine and whiskey.
I mean, rich people did.
You mean maybe cheap whiskey? Like still,
whiskey, yeah.
Still, the 60s have this like kind of fat bottom, emotional groove, sexual orientation to things. Like things are moving. I'm kind of more into that vibe, like getting hips to move.
Yeah, I wonder what
I think
I bet the substances are very genre specific, right? Heroin was a jazz thing. And then, you know, obviously, if you're listening to reggae, there's quite a bit of cannabis in that. And like those Dre records, I mean, The Chronic is literally called The Chronic. And all that bottom end and the slow tempo and the super bright snares and super aggressive things. Steely Dan records, very bright, yeah.
All the way up to MDMA for trance records and techno records and ways to lose yourself in music. And yeah.
There might be I wonder if there are other discussions or books, or maybe it's just for us to research and talk about, but the idea of drugs and sound, I haven't really thought a lot about before, but certainly that's going to make a big effect. Do you know anything else about what happens to your ears on different substances? I never really thought about the alcohol thing.
Probably something, or I think it's less what happens to your ears and more bodily, right? So if you're talking about cocaine, in the 80s, and you know, you're just adrenalized, man. You're just like, you turn that shit up, feels good. I don't think that's more about any dulling to the hearing, and in fact, you might be overly sensitized to things and heightened. I don't know. I've actually, to be honest, I've never done cocaine, so I don't know what music sounds like on cocaine. I probably will never. It's one of those things that I have chosen never to do. But I would imagine it's more bodily than completely auditory and science-based. I think that when it comes to the alcohol, we know that. We know it affects the curve of the human ear. So I have to take that seriously, knowing it. It's like those things when you find out and you choose to not take certain things seriously, it's irresponsible. It's like when I find out that this amount of caffeine is spiking my cortisol level. Like, if I don't need to have caffeine throughout the day, why am I going to choose to drink it in order to feel stressed when I already feel stressed a lot of the time, right? So you do meditation to mitigate stress. You do breathing. You do exercise. You do all these things to mitigate stress, and you're just going to drink this leisurely cup of coffee. It's just like, it doesn't equate to my brain anymore. That being said, I'm going to experiment for a month, and I love coffee. But then there's the redundancy of caffeine in the morning routine of your between 7 and 10 a.m. It's actually like pretty, on most people, it's about 7:30. You get the cortisol spike in general to wake you up out of the circadian rhythm, right? So it's redundant. And apparently the tolerance built on of caffeine comes from your body running off the fuel of caffeine instead of the cortisol. So, in fact, I was just reading some studies this morning about this, trying to get my head around why I'm doing this. And I know. I love
trying to feel good about it.
Trying to feel good about it, exactly. And I realized that it's actually the best time to drink coffee would be between 10 and 12, right? So you've come off your cortisol uptake and you're about to have another one at 12:31 p.m., which is the midday one before the last one before sleep. You have 3 per day, and each of them rise slightly less than each other as the day goes on. So you might as well have your cup of coffee when you're not boosting your cortisol, and you'll have less of a dependence on the need for it.
Somebody asked the guy, I love Evan too. I was just reading some studies this morning. Yeah, that's why these conversations are going online, because John will read studies about the experiments he's doing about himself. That's a beautiful thing.
The other thing, I don't know if I brought this up to you, was the study of loud music for extended period of time and cortisol boost. So I'll be mixing a record, and it happened this morning. I was mixing this morning, and when I crank it for more than a minute, like I listen pretty loud when I crank, just to make feel the kick. This is a reggaeton record. It's deep. I just want to make sure I feel it right. And I found a study that was talking about industrial workers with machine loudness, like machines that are very loud for long periods of time, and the effects it had on their cortisol levels and their stress. I was like, I just Googled just to see what's about to happen, and there's deep studies on these things. And of course there are. There's studies on everything. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe I need to mix quieter for extended periods of time and then turn it up quick to make sure I feel good and then go back down. Because really, I'm as I get older, I mean, stress kills us, right? So that's like a mystery. Now, granted, I'm 34 years old. I'm not, hopefully won't be dying anytime soon.
I don't think you will be. I think it'd be good.
Yeah, I take care of myself and whatever, but these are other things to go deeper. So it's now that I know that, I can't help but, because I sweat when I'm mixing sometimes, and I don't know why. There's no reason. It's this.
I love that so much. That's fucking hilarious and wonderful.
Not hot up here. I have my AC on. It's 70, 72 degrees. It feels really comfortable, and I'm sweating. My face is turning red. It's like, oh, that's stress. That's cortisol, because I'm listening loud and I'm adrenalized, and it's like this. So anyway, yeah, I'm definitely reading studies on
Todd in the chat asked about hunger and mixing. You and I have both experimented with different kinds of fasting, doing time restricted eating. I don't know, what is your current routine on that, and then how have you noticed it affecting focus and things like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I am still on a pretty strict. I always exist on an 80-20 rule. So I do everything that I do at 80% of the time. We have to do
great.
Ourselves 20% of the time. But I do intermittent fasting. It's been a bunch of years. Minimum would be 14 hours. I'm normally around 16. Today was 16, right on the dot, to be honest. And sometimes the fast is broken with a protein shake after my bike ride or workout, and no food. So it could be a solid food fast for 24 hours, maybe just a dinner or something.
We're in an interesting era where people are realizing that hunger, in terms of like daily hunger, is not a bad thing, and maybe even a really good thing for focus. Do you mix in a fasted state? Have you done much of that?
Yeah, I mix before eating. First songs usually before eating. I might break up the day with a meal and have my second mix come after I have some food. If I'm going to be with I have a live stream after this with someone for some notes, and I'll probably eat something before that. Just make sure. So if we go longer into that, because when I'm by myself, I could feel as shitty as I want at that end of that hunger pang where you're like, it's time to eat. But the minute you're with someone else and you're more irritable, you don't want to say the wrong thing to someone because you're clouded. So if I'm going to be collaborative with someone, I'm usually have eaten before that.
Well, breaking news, I am currently in a fasted state right now.
Wonderful.
So we'll see how this compares to other things. Yeah, we ate so much food last night. I mean, I sent you pictures. There was so much.
A lot of carbs.
It was a lot. It was a lot going on.
The other thing, when you're eating carbs, you emotionally get hungry every 3 hours because your insulin has gone back down to normal after the spike, right? So you think you're hungry every 3 hours, but really you're not. You're storing fat. You're storing energy all the time. So you don't need to be eating every 3 hours. And we're all guilty of it. If I have my cheat weekend Sunday after Saturday night, Sunday's fucked. Like, I'm just craving. I had like 4 chocolate chip cookies this weekend. I never do that. I'd at least 4, maybe more. And I don't remember. So Sunday was a tough day. And that's why I couldn't hang out last night. Yesterday was not a good day.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
But that's how it works. When you're so used to not cheating and then you have a cheat meal, it affects everything.
Yeah.
Need the period of come down by myself.
Well, you and I spoke at the end of last week about a few potential topics that we could get into, and obviously we'll just talk about whatever we feel like talking about.
Yeah.
One conversation that I've actually had, I had a Zoom call with an A&R guy this morning, and I was talking to a few people this weekend and getting vocals, doing these remote Zoom sessions, the way that people are being creative now, where they're forced to not be in the same room. And there's a lot of drawbacks. There's some benefits to that as well. But one of the big questions for every session is, who's going to cut the vocal? How are we going to get a good vocal? How are you going to vocal produce remotely? How do you vocal? The older I get, the more I realize that vocal is everything in this whole process. The lyric, the performance, the top line, the mix of it, all of that stuff. I mean, you talk about your mixes, you set them up with low end and vocal. Yeah. There are a number of questions about how do you get a good. We talked about a little last week too about mic technique. Yeah. People recording at home. I don't know if I have a specific question for you. I've just been thinking about a lot and talking about a lot. I had a song I wrote with an artist last weekend. She cut the vocal. She's a great singer and just has an SM7 and Logic and some basic interface, no compressor, no EQ, nothing like that. And I think it's probably just like right up on it and just singing in, and suggested to have, just to talk about mic technique and talk about performance. I know you're not doing Zoom writing sessions, but do you have thoughts about people that are recording vocals a lot for the first time at home and like how to think about that? You
kind of just hit on it. You said for the first time at home. I think people have been recording vocals at home for a decade now, right? So I would say 50-50. I'm getting home recorded vocals to mix. So that's where kind of last week's discussion talked about. I think when I think about mic technique, I think about trial and error. Most people don't know what it is, right? So now that you know what it is, ask yourself what that means. Google what that means.
Mic technique, you mean?
Yeah, mic technique. Look into mic technique. So that's the first thing we should talk about. Read about mic technique. Then do trial and error. Go closer. Sing the first verse. Go back. Sing the first verse again. How do you like it in the mix when it's not in your headphones? Make sure, like I said last week, your monitoring level. Check your monitoring mix. Make sure that you're comfortable, that you're not moving closer to the mic to hear yourself more. You're turning up the volume of the vocal in the box to hear yourself better, right? So I think you can get a great recorded vocal at home. I think you should pay attention to the distance between the walls where you are. Any nulls in the room. Don't be directly in the middle of the room. Maybe put a mattress up against the wall and face the microphone towards the wall.
Explain null to people. The idea of frequency being in between.
Cancellations between hard surfaces. So the rule of thumb is you don't want to be in the middle of a room for listening. And I don't actually know this to be the case fully, but I would imagine for recording as well, because the room is still activating the same way. So
definitely.
Again, trial and error, right? So sing the exact same thing with the same emphasis somewhere else. Because when you're in the studio, there seems to be this aspect of trust, right? There's a professional recording engineer in the room. They put you in a spot. You don't even think this is subconscious. Oh, this is the best place for me to be singing because that person put me there.
Yeah.
I've never really thought about this, and I'm kind of just riffing out. But when you're in your room, you're all of a sudden not confident. So you're like, wait, this isn't a studio. Okay, well, let's make it a studio, right? So again, mattress up, maybe some bath towels, hang them on a microphone stand, just something that breaks up hard surfaces and reflections off that. Maybe do it near a bookshelf where there's some natural diffusion helping. Like, think about all these things, but trust yourself that you know what sounds good. So if you don't think it sounds good, don't send it to a mixer or the producer hoping that they make it sound good.
A vocal should sound good. If you have an SM7 and no compressor, and you're just going on a little $200 USB interface, you should be able to make a good sounding vocal. And I guess it's probably just intimidating to, if you are someone, even if you record a lot of vocals at home, but all of a sudden you know that that's the only option. I think a lot of people record quote unquote demo vocals or day of vocals. There's a traditional way to think about that where, okay, well, we can go back and we can go to a great studio and do it properly, or we can go back and do it. Everybody should be an engineer and setting up their studio like they're singing a finished vocal every time.
The magic tends to happen in the demo, right? That's most of the time that's the case. So you want to capture it right the first time. And I don't think there's anything, another topic that I wanted to discuss with you today was let's discuss why I don't like to talk about equipment or plugins, so that we can talk about equipment at some point. But partly because you nailed it with a $200 converter and microphone. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't advise that that's the best way to get the proper vocal. But yes, equipment aside, you should be able to put a performance into the computer or onto a tape machine that you can hear back and be satisfied with, and say that sounds good. I like that. I'm gonna send that to so and so. They're gonna touch it up. They're gonna level it out into the mix, give it more impact. But I gave the emotion that I wanted to get, and you could hear that through it. So gear aside, it's how to go about the process to begin with and how to trust yourself. So I think that's why when I hear people recommending different pieces of gear, it's like, well, what are you trying to get out of that gear? And then we can talk about that gear. But what you're talking about is how, in this crazy world right now, how do we get the simplest thing, the lead vocal, the simplest and most important part of production, to be captured? This is without that, you're going for the best instrumental Grammy. Like, that's not, I don't know. No offense to the people that go for that. But
congrats to everyone who's won an instrumental Grammy.
Or Mad Lib, I don't care. I don't care about yours.
It's a different thing. Yeah, the setting up, I guess you were talking about before about setting up a studio, the basic things that a lot of people know, but maybe people haven't done a lot of, and I've done so much of, just making records in bedrooms and dorm rooms and living rooms and that sort of thing. Get rid of hard walls, and let's say thoughts on recording vocals on Omni. We talked about that a little last week. It just anything you can do to eliminate the room, because it's very likely that the room it will not be designed in an acoustically pleasing manner. Now, certainly recording in Omni in a studio that doesn't have parallel walls and has a nice thing, there's an effect to that, but it's pretty rare that people making records at home will ever have any need for that. And Omni, of course, if people who don't know, it's a pattern of the microphone where basically it picks up in all directions as opposed to a single direction.
We wouldn't do that in a bedroom unless you're going for a bedroom clap sound that you want all the reflections to come back to you on. Maybe flip to Omni for the clap track.
Yeah, well, that's another thing too, that the ability to utilize the room for other types of sounds. If you're recording a vocal, blankets and coat racks, absolutely. I've put lots of blankets on microphone stands and hung them, like you said, over bookshelves. Put a mattress from a second bedroom that you're renting somewhere and putting it up against the wall so the wall isn't hard. I mean, anything you can do to knock down those high frequency reflections.
I think something to double down on here is to say that you can get a great vocal in your bedroom. I think that's something to reinforce here. It is very possible. So if you're not doing it, you're doing something wrong. So ask a friend, ask one of us, ask the internet how to do it, and don't stop until you figure it out, because there are ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, Billie Eilish, the best example of that. They literally made that in a bedroom. But in a room that's not super boomy, if you clap and you hear a bunch of reflections, the room is too boomy. But then again, if you're trying to get a cool clap sound, amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. Oh, so you're talking about monitoring, I think, is a really interesting topic, because I think, at least for me, when I think about monitors, I'm thinking about high quality speakers. But of course, monitoring is really about just how it sounds, what it sounds like. And it's a lot about how the room is set up and the volume you're listening to things. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about just how you think about monitoring?
Well, it's everything. It's all of those things. It's everything. It's and I think it's one of those things that you can correlate it to price. I think the more expensive the monitors are a lot of the time, there's probably a better way to say this. The higher quality the monitors are, the more they're going to cost. Right?
You get what you pay for in speakers, generally.
I think that monitoring is the most important of all the things. So when someone's telling me about the preamp that they want to buy, my first question is, what are your monitors? Every time. Because I think you should save your money towards that first and then figure out what. Because the monitors will allow you to tell yourself if you like the preamp that you're about to buy or thinking about buying. So when we talk about monitoring and we talk about bad recorded vocals, you don't even know that you recorded the vocals badly if you have a bad set of monitors. You think it sounds good, right? You have really no reference point for what good sounds like. And it's one of those things you think your studio sounds good till you hear a good one. And for people that have never heard a good studio because they've always been in the bedroom, the reference point is really low.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And that's a blessing and a curse in a sense, right? Where you want to feel like you're comfortable in your space because it's your space and you don't need to go somewhere else to make a hit song. Like you don't need to, but you should care about room treatment. You should care about where your monitors are placed because this is low hanging fruit. This can be solved in so many rooms. There's going to be a few rooms out there, square bedrooms in a 2-bedroom apartment. It's like, wow, I don't really know what we can do with you. But even then, there's probably a way to move the desk, speakers up against the wall. There's ways to do this. So I think monitoring is the most important. I think good monitors are the thing you should spend your money on first.
That's one of the first things. I mean, this is, when I was 18, I think I saved up for the Mackeys with the 8-inch woofers because I didn't quite have the money for them, but I waited another 6 months so I could get a little bit more solid sound. And obviously, we're sort of levels higher than that right now. And I see that there's quite a PMC gang in the comments. So, and I don't have PMC. You've been telling me PMC is amazing for a while. So that when I do my next upgrade,
my life, right? They have the highest SPL output without distortion, right? So when you're trying to figure out what speakers to get, you want something that has a high headroom for distortion because you don't want, like we said about converters, we don't want your converters to distort because then you think that your mix is done beforehand, before it's actually done because it distorts. Same with the monitors. You don't want monitors to distort because all of a sudden you think things sound hard. So when I hear PMCs, and interesting, we should talk about this because there's so many people online that say PMCs are bright. And my response to that is no, music is bright. Pop music is really bright. And PMCs, because they're not saturating or distorting the top end, are showing you what's happening, right? Granted, depending on the room you're in, and if you have no absorption in your room, it's a bunch of sheetrock. Yeah, I mean, any speaker is going to sound bright. So if you have a speaker that you're like, oh, this sounds warm in this room, it's not the speaker that's doing that. It's, in fact, that speaker's probably dull and has no accuracy to begin with, right? So the fact that PMCs feel bright to people is their level of high-end extension and accuracy. Like I can tell the difference. Granted, my ears are trained, and I've done this for a while, but I can tell the difference between 11K and 12K, right? I'm not doing shelves at 10K all the way up. Like I'm really refined with my high-end boost because there's a lot of density up there. There's a lot of washiness, and I want to determine where the cymbals are and where the vocal sits, right? So I have no problem reducing 9K in a vocal. Like I'm sure other people agree with this, but I can do it confidently because of the extension of the PMCs.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, you please jump in.
No, finish your thought. I have an overall thing, but I want you to keep going. I'm interested.
Yeah, it's something that kind of irks me when I hear that, because yes, they sound bright, but pop music is way too bright for too long of a period of time.
Do you think that's changing at all? Going to change? You think that's just what it is forever, and then we just have cortisol-inducing volume and high end?
I don't think so. Because back to the loudness issues and normalization, when things get turned down, they're going to start sounding darker, right? So I think you want to be. I mean, Michael Jackson records are hi-fi. They're bright. They're the right bright. Like we talked about Usher's Confessions. It's the right bright. These are competitively bright records, but they don't sound like there's no ceiling, right? They don't sound everlasting on the top end. There's some sort of rounded offness to these things that actually, in a sense, make you perceive the top even brighter, right? So if you're not boosting top, but you're doing low pass filters, high cuts, and you start to round off, you're bringing the edges in. It's the Nyquist frequency. It's like that. So we're focusing things by making them darker. Now, I'm not saying down to 12K, 15K. I'm talking like 28 and these inaudible areas. You do these offs. That's actually going to make speakers and music feel brighter than boosting 10K too far, you know?
I'm literally going to change how I think about high end because of this conversation. This idea that there can be a focus in 11K and not 9 or 10, and that can actually, you can have things that I think of as having competing frequencies, but maybe a vocal, the sort of sibilance happens at 10K, but then the cymbals are above that, and making some adjustments to focus those things. Because I'm often doing just like, I want to make this brighter above 10K, so I just shelf it on some plugin. Yeah. But now I want to go use my ears more and listen like my buddy John.
I send screenshots sometimes to homies because I have a EQ on my master bus that has a high cut. I think it's 27K or 28K. It's so high, but I am minus 10 to 14 dB on every pop mix. Everyone. And no one's like, can you make this brighter?
What effect does that achieve? That roundness you're talking about?
I see the high end. How do I do this on the screen?
I don't know.
From back here, the high end is like, again, I use that word never ending. Like you can't see the tweeter. You can't hear the tweeter. It's just like, it's in my ceiling high end towards it's now in a range of audibility. Like if I was in headphones, it starts becoming more visual because it's actually focused. It's actually there. It's like vignetting the photo, right? It's showing a bit of the graininess on the outside so you can focus on what's actually supposed to be focused on. You can keep boosting high end. You're just adding energy that's never going to be perceived. Like it's just impossible. It's like a lot of people's issue with low end. We're like, oh, we can filter up to 30 because speakers don't reproduce that. I'm never going to feel that way. I leave down to 12 on kicks and 808s a lot of the time. But the high end is where I'm doing that shift and focus. So it's just a different way of mixing. And I mean, I'd love to get called out if people think that my mixes are dark, but please.
Well, your mixes are as clear as anybody's. Some of those Khalid records are just like, I told you about it at one point months ago where I was hanging with a friend of mine pre-pandemic when we were allowed to do this casually and listening off of an iPhone, and one of the Khalid records came on and it just, all of the transients just cracked, and it was some modern pop playlist. But there was something about the high end that was not bright, but was like not just clear, but like aggressive. And now that I think about it, it is that like each element, even in the high end, sort of has its own focus.
Yeah.
You're going to turn me into a mixer.
Otherwise it gets, wow, that's the most amazing compliment one can get on Instagram Live. Mixes have a darkness that reminds me of Russ Elevato. Woo! Sorry.
I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
D'Angelo's
okay. Yeah, his engineer. Amazing. All right. I
think I'm going to quit. So, no, there's a focus that needs to be brought to every element of a mix. That's kind of our job, right? So, I think I was asked by you last week, like, what do you even do as a mixer? And I don't really have a good answer. I think I just answered it. I think I bring a soft focus to everything, right? I say soft focus because you don't want to focus on only one thing all the time. You want to have his ear candies coming in. I mean, you can argue that the vocal should be focused on at all times. But other than that, you don't want the hi-hat to distract. You want the hi-hat to push the beat forward. You don't want the guitar to come out until that riff comes in the middle of the vocal. So you got to have these like soft focuses so people can instruments can be people as well, and jump out at you. And I use the term active because I want things like I was just talking to my homie Dennis about this. Most people kind of in their mid-20s becoming mix engineers that are to me like very good and very close, their mixes sound very contained. They sound very good, very clean, very mixed. But what makes something special, and you can tell that someone's been doing this for decades, is how active they can make things and dynamic, but also keeping that density and that focus. But it's active. It's that way that we like, something jumps out at you. Tony would come to me in the room and be like, this sounds really good, but like, what's going to bring the excitement? Something needs to jump out over there. Like that thing over there, that guitar, like, why is that held back? Let's push that up here. And he would always try to find something else that would jump out of the speakers. And I think back to monitoring, that's how I feel about PMCs. If like they let things jump out, so they two ways to think about it. One, it divulges problems, something's too dynamic, or one, it makes you energized and feel impacts from the speaker, and the speaker isn't muddying it up. Like when I think about an ATC, I think there's like a mid-range cloud that exists there that is musical and rich to some degree. So you think that things are punchy, but it's the speaker that's punchy. So I can always tell when a producer, and I call it out a lot, produced on ATCs, because the drums just don't hit, but the chords are tight.
Interesting.
Like, it's the easiest gig to mix for, because I can keep that rich musicality that they got from that, and I can make the drums hit, vocal pop, and my job's done in a few hours. But I can usually tell when someone's on ATC. So speakers have a character to it, and I think the PMC thing is super fun, right? So it's active in a way that you can engage in a fun way, in a fun manner with the mix and the production, but it's also true. It's so three-dimensional. There's no distortion, and it still has that rich mid when you make the music right, when you arrange it right. It's showing the problem spaces. When someone says it's scooped, it's because your mix is scooped. So if you're listening to pop music, you're like, oh, this is bright, and it's an Ariana Grande mix. Like, that song is scooped.
Shit is bright as fuck.
It's bright as fuck. Like,
yeah.
Some things, I don't want to call out things on this platform, but some things are unlistenable on my speakers, and I put them on the Sonos to listen to. I'll put them on the AirPods to listen to enjoy. On the PMCs, it's completely unlistenable. It doesn't mean the speakers are bright. It means the music's bright. There's
so many interesting directions to go out of all of that. We'll need to continue to do this, it seems. There's a few people in the chat. Thus far, I'm putting these on my IGTV, but we're actually meeting later this week, and we're gonna get audio versions of this, put it up on YouTube. We're gonna get this all sorted, because a lot of people have asked about how they can listen to these things, how they can watch them again. But as of right now, I'm just gonna put it up on my IGTV so you can watch it. But
we'll all sort it.
But we'll get all kinds of versions. We may get clips of particular things as well. The monitoring thing, the punchiness of speakers, that's something that I find really interesting that I haven't looked a lot into. But are there different materials or different ways? Like you talked about the ATCs versus PMCs, and then the ways that woofers actually, like whether the material they're made from or whatever, they push more punchy or less punchy. Is it a speaker design thing? Like, what is it about ATCs that
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the schematics of most speakers. I know a fair amount about the PMCs because they're transmission line technology. and their extended maze of a pattern inside that lets the low end have more room to, I guess,
literally physical air inside them.
Yes, yeah. There's more physical air, and it's designed through this maze thing that you can allow the frequencies to actually exist, right? So in a cabinet, most prosumer speaker cabinets cannot produce a 60 hertz cycle, right? It's not possible physically in that cabinet. So normally you rely on the room to reproduce that, and then in bad rooms, and you have poor monitoring because it's just, there's dips at 64, but you have a crazy 60, and then you have a dip at 80, but a crazy 90. It's, that's all room issues. The speaker can only work so hard. But yeah, PMC my cabinets are huge. I think they go down to 12. I mean, I have, they're 8 foot, maybe like 6.5 foot speaker cabinets. They're huge. They're taller than me.
Is that just sort of what's that?
So I can hear down to 12 hertz and
okay,
or whatever it is.
Just sort of a funny anecdote. Before I had the ability to actually shoot the room and get a graph to come out, I would have various references. You go into a new studio and you're writing that day, not even mixing, but just you're going and working with somebody. You want to know what the monitoring sounds like. So, you have your playlist of references. And there's a particular, it's the first track off Speaker Box Love Below, which is just called Speaker Box, where the beat comes in 30 seconds in. There's an 808 dip where it's almost literally they're taking the slider on the MPC and going do 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 do. So you can actually, it's almost like a sub sweep that's musical. And I was fascinated once I found that track and realized what I could use it for. Every monitoring situation, including every major studio, as in, had all these giant voids in low end.
Yep.
And I was just baffled by it. Even in some of the best studios in the world,
they're not built for.
The monitoring's not yet. Well, maybe that's what it is they were designed. It comes from a studio design era where people weren't using 40 cycle 808s as a musical element.
That too. And it was designed to accommodate a console. It was designed to accommodate a lot of people. It was designed to accommodate things that we do not need to accommodate now to make things sound good, which is why what makes a modern, or to me at least, what makes something sound modern is how deep it is, how punchy it is. Because again, we talked about, I think last week, I look at phasing of kicks first. I make sure that every kick and 808 or bass is in phase. That's how you get low end, not by boosting low end. That's how you get it tight and punchy. That when the low end hits, that's why when you listen to old 70s disco records, the kick and the bass are flamming because dudes are in the room playing. It's almost, they're fucking good. Donna Summer records are tight and they hit and they make you dance, but they're flammy as fuck. They're not Chromeo wouldn't deliver it that way right now, right? Blinding Lights wouldn't be delivered that way. That's so all this stuff is aligned phase wise, right? And monitoring also lets you hear different phases. So I'm giving notes on a friend's project right now that he's doing everything on, and one of the first things I said on a song was, "Hey, you should tune your kick down one semitone." And I didn't hear from him for a day. The next day he goes, "What the fuck are your ears, man? What do you mean the kick down a semitone? That changed the entire low end." I was like, "Yeah, I wouldn't say the note unless I knew it was going to work." I have speakers that can reproduce it, so I could hear that the kick is out of tune with the song and the bass in a way that's not charming, right? Sometimes you want that. You want a kick and an 808 to be out of tune just enough to get that rub. It can't be too clean. There has to be. I think an MPC, an 808 drum machine is 30 cents flat, I believe.
Really?
I think it's something like that. Where if you had a perfectly in tune kick and 808, people would feel uncomfortable because that's not historically how it felt.
Well, there's also the bend of the note, just like you hit a drum or to go ding.
Yeah,
that's a really important part too.
And I think when people take out the attack of the 808 and the kick and they leave it only in the kick and they do that round thing, I think that's extreme. I think if you had them in phase, you get even more impact. I've never seen Tony, who mixed thousands of 808s, cut and fade someone's 808. Drunken Love, the 808 fucking slaps, and Tony didn't adjust Hit Boy's 808. He just went into it, and I had the stems to that. I mean, I was in there when he was mixing it. Like, this 808 has an attack, and so does the kick, and that shit slaps.
So here's a question about that real quick. Sorry to interrupt you. If you get a track where the 808s and the kick are perfectly lined up and that first downbeat just smashes and it's phasing the right way, but then the pitch of the 808 changes and some of them are slightly more or less in phase, I've found not only is it good to maybe flip phase or adjust things or whatever, but also sometimes you get a note that isn't perfect either way. How do you deal with that? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So we're like, you have three, let's say just so you understand what I'm saying. Let's say you have 4 notes in the 808 and it's the same kick drum, and the first note in the progression lines up perfectly and punches. The second note is out of phase, but the third and fourth aren't really in or out. And so you basically can't set them so they have the even amount of punch. Yeah,
that would probably be because they're higher in the scale, right? So the wave tighter than the kick, so that the crest and trough are smaller than the wave of the length of the kick one. I mean, do that on another track, change it, or I've actually taken the attack of a different note and spliced it, but left the pitch of the, you know what I mean? So the kick still hits at the right length, and you just crossfade. So I think there's a lot of tricks to that. But again, it's not going to be perfect, and an 808 kick relationship can never be perfect.
Yeah.
So it's
Well, what you're saying too is you're not necessarily even going for perfection on it. It's whatever the fuck sounds the best.
Yes, it is. But there is an objective point here, that is when a kick and another piece of low end cancel each other out, by default, you have less low end than if you boosted 20 dB of 60 hertz. Right?
And it sounds uncomfortable because it's supposed to be impactful at that moment. It's going to go, like, I remember the first time I was noticing that, 15 years ago, where like the downbeat hits and you just go, but it's not, why is it like turn it up and it wouldn't get louder?
Weird vengeance like impact that has low end that someone didn't filter and it's out of phase.
I'm the one who didn't filter it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing.
Most people don't. That's my job. So that's the first thing I check is every downbeat. If there's 17 things that hit on the downbeat, I'm checking phase on all of them. Sometimes the guitar that's out of phase with the drums because there's low end in the guitar because whatever, like the pick hit the guitar and there's like a thump in the amp that feels good. You don't want to get rid of that. It's got to be in phase if you don't want to get rid of it.
Yeah, Josh asked on yours, do you use something that lets you get in between phase? I assume that means like other things other than just flipping the phase. Like you said, you might grab an attack or a nudge or something.
I've messed with the Little Labs thing, but no, I just nudge until it feels good. I mean, we're talking 10 samples to 100 samples. You're talking little bits. I'll do a nudge and an invert phase. So like I'll move people. I mean, yesterday's mix or this morning's mix? Sorry, this morning's mix was the 808 was hitting before the kick. So when I nudged it back so it was in phase, it also needed to be inverted. It's like there's, you just got to keep fucking around.
Just playing around with it. One other question on monitoring. I've had this question from a few people who can't go out and spend thousands of dollars or have a really shitty room. And so have a monitoring setup, but headphones. Are there any headphones you like? How do you think about headphones?
I got to ask that question too. I don't have an answer to that. I kind of want a good pair of headphones purely for enjoyment of listening to music. I use these biodynamic T1 headphones. They're expensive though, so it's not going to answer the question properly. And I like them a lot. I'm also not a headphoner.
Yeah.
I'll be real with everyone. I don't ever put headphones on.
I love headphones. I love listening on headphones. I just have these all over the studio. What are these? These are they're fine. They're fun. I'm using them for mixing. They're just too hyped, but they're fun and they're easy and they're $150. I used to have a pair of those Grados, like super fancy. They even call them ear speakers, and those are really great and clean, but just not really useful. They didn't.
This Sony pair, or was it? Yeah, there's a Sony pair. I don't. We'll come back to this. I don't know the answer to good headphones. So everyone in the comments are giving their opinions. I don't know. We should probably vet some.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that I use headphones when I need to be quiet and I'm just creating, but I don't, it's almost like a third reference or something. It's probably best to have something that's actually really moving air in front of you, if at all possible. And then everything else is just like an alternate reference. Yeah, the MDR 7506s, those aren't bad. I mean, all those are like 100, 150, but the Sonys, the Audio Technicas, they're all kind of the same to me.
Yeah.
I like these because they look cool and feel nice, but
I don't know. I want air to be moved in the room.
Yeah, like getting something with good subwoofers. Yeah, nothing replaces great monitoring. And then checking on your iPhone. AirPods and iPhone.
Yeah, AirPods and iPhone.
I mean, the truth is, like, that's what a lot of people are listening on. And somebody asked too, this is sort of just opinion, I suppose. Why is pop music continuously gotten brighter? Is it people having shitty monitoring setups and you're just trying to bad monitoring?
Bad monitoring, lack of know-how with what limiters do. So, you get 11 dB of reduction on a limiter. It's just like, man, that's not the point of the limiter.
Everything is crunching and distorting. And
it dictates the entire feel of the record that way, and it's baked in. So as roughs are getting louder and louder and more baked in vibe, there's less that a mixer and a mastering engineer can do. There's no headroom. I don't know.
I mean, the truth is, if you play two recordings next to each other and one of them is slightly louder, people will perceive that as slightly more exciting. Slightly brighter, it's slightly more exciting. And so when you just get that over and over and over, and the louder stuff's just going to, I think it's a natural sort of progression.
I'm wondering if there's a way, and this is kind of my mission, this is kind of what I'm doing in general, is I'm wondering if you can get a more physical, bodily, emotional reaction to music when there's more fundamental harmonic and chordal elements that actually make you feel what the lyric is directing you to feel. And instead of letting like brightness and that fake appeared loudness and energy, it's an experiment I'm doing, and I keep getting hired, so I think I'm doing something right. But am I mixing all the top 10 hits right now? No, of course not. So there's something to say about that. I don't think that my methodology would not work at that level. I think it's about having a couple more that allow that to become a version or a new norm. We're seeing new norms in widespread right now, so I'm not.
The whole world is a new norm.
So I'm pretty optimistic that what I'm going for will get its shot one day.
I think so too. I want you to keep going. We got another 8 minutes or 7 minutes or so. I'm trying to see some vocals, see what people are asking. There's two really good questions and two really good topics that we could talk for hours about. One of them was, and this one I think maybe more for me than for you, is about ego. So maybe we could jump in that another time. I mean, for everyone. Ego as it applies to mixing, producing, writing. I think maybe we can dig into it more next week, but I think that varies across the roles, at least for me. Like when I'm writing a lyric with someone, I get really attached to it. If somebody says, we have this song that we're really attached to, can you help it make it sound great? Whether it's produce it, finish the production, mix it, whatever. I'm not nearly as attached to it for my own self. But in terms of, we talked about, maybe this is the first time talking about professionalism. Professionalism is entirely about dealing with other people's ego and being reliable. I think more than anything else is because everybody else is freaked out in this whole process of record making. And for you to be a person that helps deal with that well seems like that's what all the professionalism is helping other people's egos.
Yeah. This should be the entire topic of next week. There's a lot to go into here. I would say on a personal front, I don't feel like my ego gets in the way majority of the time. That being said, I think I have, like we just touched on before this question, I think I have a sonic agenda. Yeah,
you have opinions, you have a philosophy of things that you're trying to achieve.
So I'm going to go for it. But if at the end of the day, someone doesn't want it, I have to make a decision. And the decision is, do I do what they want or do I bow out of the project because I don't feel like I can give them what they want? So the ego gets quickly extinguished. And that's fine. But I'm going to go in with some sort of desire for a specific outcome that I think I have to offer.
Well, let's maybe we should end it there, because another great question that came in was about difficult conversations with clients. So that overlaps nicely with that, where you have an idea, and you and I both have pretty deep ideas and opinions and taste. Not that other people can't have them as well, and mine change and yours change, and that's one of the reasons we're friends. We push each other on things, and surrounding yourself with people that help your taste evolve. But there are certainly times when my taste and somebody I'm collaborating with or being hired by are pretty different, and it doesn't become clear until you're already into the project. And maybe we'll talk about that next week and how to do that.
Perfect world, you would work with people that your taste is aligned with from the beginning, right? And if you were to start up a new collaborative relationship in the songwriting, and for your case, have a coffee or a meal before to make sure you even align on certain values before creating, right? So when it comes to a mix, I'm getting hired by multiple people. I'm getting hired by a A&R, a manager, an artist, a producer. There's so many people involved. And at the end of the day, I have to give them what they want.
And they're already involved. They're all already a collective that have been building a thing.
Yeah. So tough conversations with them are minimal, because really I'm a work for hire. And I like that. I don't have, again, that's the ego conversation. We'll go deeper into this next week. I don't have an ego because of that. I know my place. That being said, they're hiring me for a reason. Especially if someone says, "Hey, John, super big fan of what you did and love you," and they get really, really specific into what they loved about it. Like, I'm going to come at them then with that approach. So if they want that, then I have grounds to stand on that say, well, this is what you asked for. Here's a version that sounds that sonically resounds. So granted, the DNA is so different, but this is the same approach that I took on it. So there's grounds to stand up to have that conversation, and then maybe there's a compromise, or maybe you even convince them in a sense. This is actually what they wanted, but they weren't hearing it that way. This is another one. Those are two for next week for sure.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next week. My experience as someone who's, like I said, involved in so many different aspects of the process, depending on the project, ego plays a much larger point, because, like I said, I'm not going to sit there with an artist who I've gotten to know, and we're all of a sudden writing a song about her relationship with her father. I'm going to be invested in it. It's the only way I'm going to help be a good producer and co-writer is if I'm emotionally invested in some way. And then, of course, my ego is going to come into play to see what happens with that song, how we approach it, but it's a tough thing. Well, thank you guys again for watching. John, I love you very much. And I'll not screw this up, and I'll try to immediately save it and put it on my IGTV. Cool. But yeah, we're going to try to do audio versions of this. YouTube, we're meeting about it this week. So thank you guys for participating. Hit us up, ask questions, give us feedback. Thank you.
Oh, I should throw in that I have a podcast up with Doug Fern from last week.
Oh, yeah.
That the link is in my bio. And it's actually, I listened to it yesterday. I'm pretty much still stand on most of the things that I said, even though it was from a year ago. I think there's a lot in there that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can't wait to listen to that.
Maybe peep that too.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Peace.
Peace.